Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrive by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 186, we sit down with Brian Mealy, a dedicated public servant and lifelong North Fork resident whose family has deep roots in Southold. Brian has worn many hats in the community, from school boards to the Floyd Memorial Library, and now is a member of Southold Town Board, where in 2021 he became the first African American elected to office in the town's history. In our conversation, Brian reflects on his family's legacy, the values passed down from his parents, and the experiences that shaped his path into public service. We talk about the challenges and triumphs he's witnessed in local government, his advocacy for mental health, affordable housing, and environmental protection, and the moments that have affirmed why he continues to serve the community. Join us as we explore Brian's insights on leadership, community engagement, and the quiet heroes who make the North Fork the place it is today. So I hope you enjoy episode 186 with Brian Mealy. This episode was recorded October 24th, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really great to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, and it's just an honor to be on the podcast. And over the year and a half, or is it 2 years yet? How long has it been all together?
Almost 2 years.
So in that almost 2 years, helping you get some of the people to interview. And it really has been a fascinating process to hear people in our community and what our community means to them. And there are people discussing their successes and failures and how they have resilience through life, and just proud to add my story to that. So I thank you for starting the project, and I reserve the right to ask you questions about where you think the podcast is going, because you're nearly at 200 uploaded podcasts.
Almost 200, yeah.
So hopefully you have a chance to step back and take stock, and hopefully I or somebody else or a group of people can ask you some questions, because you're such a good question asker, and this has been a pretty cool experience to see how you've done it over the almost 2 years.
Oh, thank you. I hope to do one as well.
Yeah.
But no, thank you for coming on and helping out with getting it started too.
Yeah. And some of my favorite have been Elizabeth Holtzman. Gee whiz, what a person with a well-lived life and a constructive life and a model public servant, and people like Al Krupski and Tom Wickham and Bob Jester, Blieblein. You just have had a who's who of the community. So thank you.
No, definitely. No, but just to start off, I'd like to usually talk, if we can talk about your background a bit, because your family has roots out on the North Fork. Can you tell us a little bit about your ancestry here and how far back it goes?
So both sides of my family are from rural Virginia and Goochland County, Virginia, and Powhatan County, Virginia. So both my mom's side, the Gilliams, and my dad's side, the Mealys, are both from rural Virginia. Mm-hmm. Thanks to my nieces, Amira and Johara Barnes, and my sister Kim, and my brother-in-law, my brother-in-law Ian, and my sister Monica, we know some history about when we came out here, and a lot of African-American families had the Great Migration from rural places to the north to find a better place and a better living and better opportunity for their children. So that is my family's experience. So around, a little over 100 years ago, on my mom's side, we know definitely her grandfather, Joe Brown, and her grandmother, Mary Brown, lived in Southold, lived on the main road in Southold. we believe, as far as we can tell by the census, that my great-grandfather Joe was a livery driver, driving from farms to the railroad, from the railroad to the farms, and helping the Southold families with, driving their equipment. And as far as we can tell, my great-grandmother Mary worked in some of the local houses, helping the families. So that's amazing that we figured that out, and it was featured in a Newsday article by John Paul Salamanca, and our great photojournalist Randy Dodana took some of the pictures to commemorate that. So, and that's a blessing to know that. We didn't always know that history because of certain things, but thanks to my family, we figured that out. And that's when I drive down the main road Southold, we know that they lived near the town hall. So that's special.
Yes.
Being a town board member and knowing my family over 100 years ago lived on the main road in Southold. So that's Joe Brown and Mary Brown on my mom's side. And around the same time, my father's family migrated up to the North Fork, and they had been all over the Northeast in New Jersey, and parts of Virginia and on Long Island. So it really has been, you move where the work is. And my grandfather on my dad's side, Aubrey Mealy, worked in the city on some of the working waterfronts. So he just went where the work was. And then, in his life, he became a minister. So just those opportunities providing more opportunities. And then when they moved out east, he built their house, and the rest is history. But it just is knowing the foundations of all that, and that people, they had people of faith, and they prayed, and they relied on their faith to survive. And what does that legacy mean today? And how does that resonate for today? So just proud to know that. And my nieces, as I mentioned, Amira and Johara, and my brother-in-law Ian, we finally traced back our fifth great-grandfather, James Mealy, was a free-born person of color, born in 1763, and he fought under George Washington at pivotal battles. I think one battle that was pivotal was the Battle of Green River and Yorktown, which was a pivotal battle for the Continental Army to kind of overrun the British Army, which was the top army in the world. And somehow the Continental Army, bested them and outsmarted them with strategy and with manpower. And to know my fifth great-grandfather, James Mealy, was a free-born person of color and fought in those liberating fights, and we eventually got our independence.
Yes.
And, hopefully I'm doing that family name justice in the modern era. And sometimes you don't know what you don't know, but to know it now and to understand what that means, and that there were people of color who were free-born. And that's just a badge of honor and respect, and just such precious knowledge to know that. So.
Yes. And you mentioned your grandparents, but did you get to meet any of them?
Yes. I was too young. I remember my grandfather on my mom's side a little bit, and I remember my dad's father a little bit less. And my grandmothers were so great, remembering us to them. And I remember going to my mom's house, my grandma Lucy, and seeing my grandfather kind of in his old favorite chair and talking to us about some of the stories. And my grandmother was such a pivotal person in her years as one of the first people of color to be in the Department of Agriculture, being a poultry and meat inspector. And she often had to go up to Albany and upstate to get training, and my grandfather would take her. And my grandfather was a self-taught person and very handy. And somehow he came up. I don't even remember what the station wagon was. One of the old station wagons was refit to have an extra large gas tank, so they could make the trip without stopping. So I just don't know how my grandfather got that self-taught ingenuity. But I guess, we say, the old folks know how to get along, and you get along to just do the best that you can. And I'm just proud that he was able to drive my grandma up to upstate. And again, she had a really beautiful opportunity being a trailblazer. And that's been in my family for generations and on both sides of my family. So it's just proud to remember that and to remember them and remember their pictures and remember the family names. And some of them come from my grandfathers and my grandmother. So just nice to know that family history. And my mom was very proud of our family history and was our family historian and knew some of the stories that my nieces figured out through genealogical research. My mom was telling those family stories that I think we're second cousins to Sally Hemings, and
Wow.
somehow way there's a relation to the Jefferson family,
Hmm.
and a recent genealogist figured that out. But my mom was telling those stories when we were kids, and she would do programs at the local libraries, and she would talk about Black history locally, and some people would tell her, there's no such thing as Black history. My mom's like, what are you talking about? There's always been African Americans and people of color contributing to the heritage of our country. And she would do talks about I guess it was the tricentennial of Southold. She did programs talking about the contribution of people of color, and just proud to lean on that legacy and being a part of it. As the first elected person of color for Southold Town, I'm a part of that history now, and
Yes.
making sure I respect that family history and the history of the future. And who are you making space for the next generations? And hopefully people feel that the time I've been doing what I'm doing is encouraging, and whoever is encouraged can come forward and serve our community.
Yes. No, definitely. And you mentioned your mom and dad. Did they grow up in Mattituck or Southold?
My dad was born in Southold, and it was I believe at the time it was common to have midwives.
Okay.
So my grandma, Rose Mealy, was supported by a midwife, and he was born in Laughing Water, Southold. And of his family, they used to live, as I said, they came up from Virginia and they lived in New Jersey. He was the first and only born in Southold. So that was something proud that, he was born and raised here in Southold. And my mom grew up in Riverhead. Both sides of the family worked this is another badge of honor, that we worked alongside the Polish farmers.
Yes.
And my mom knew some Polish phrases, and just beautiful to work and to know that, that's our farming history. And my family was a part of that for a long time. And, they were worked hard and got their own property and had little gardens on their own property. And, the success of the Polish farmer was the success of my family. So that's proud. And my mom grew up in Riverhead, graduated from Riverhead High School, and went on to nursing school and was a nurse at it's called Peconic Bay Medical Center now, but at the time it was called Central Suffolk Hospital. So she was a nurse there. And my dad grew up in Southold and graduated from Southold School, and to this day, some of his track records are still in place. So he was a prominent member on the track and field team, and some of his trophies are in the trophy case at Southold. And just that he was proud to be a Southolder. And he went on to become one of the first African-American corrections officers at the county jail in Riverhead or whatever that, close by. And, knowing Sheriff Tulin now, and my dad was a trailblazer, it just is nice to have that piece of history as well, that my dad was a trailblazer, one of the first sergeants as a corrections officer, person of color, and he was proud, and he treated people fairly that under his charge. And when he was retired, a lot of people that he was responsible for would come up and, Mr. Mealy, I just want you remember I was, wasn't doing well when I was in jail, but you treated me fair. We'd always be like, what is this guy saying to Dad? Or what's going on? But my dad treated people fairly, that he wasn't ever worried about people coming up to him because he treated people fairly. And that was nice to know, that my dad did the best he could, and the people, not always suffering in that circumstance, but did better after they did their time, and you forgive and move on and can do better things. So just to be able to see that, we say that, but to realize that, you can pay for your mistakes and do better when you get out. And what Dad's responsibility was to oversee that the people did their time as best they could, and then they move on. So
yes. And I was just wondering if he would talk about just his time growing up in Southold as a kid, and if he told you any stories about
where the house is now in Laughing Water, my dad would say the crick or the creek.
Oh, yeah, the crick.
So, and then his father, Aubrey, they often got clams
Mm-hmm.
and different things from the crick, and fishing and hunting. It just was in our family background, and Laughing Water is one of the most beautiful communities that we have, and kind of inheriting that for myself, like. Where I live in Mattituck, there's a bridge and there's an inlet and the creek or the creek,
Yeah.
and just doing those same things, like fishing off the bridge and throwing rocks, skipping rocks in the inlet, and
Mm-hmm.
riding my bike around our town, and in the 80s, being proud I had a Mongoose dirt bike, and anybody from the 80s knows there was Huffy and Mongoose, and
Mm-hmm.
somehow way I got a Mongoose dirt bike, and just pedaling around our town and people looking out for us. Like, if I don't think I ever really did anything bad, but like people looking out for us, like
Mm-hmm.
the moms really knowing where the kids were and reporting, make the kids are on Maple Lane,
Mm-hmm.
should they be there? And then all the moms would like, we could even, my mom could call me from the front door and I would hear it
Mm-hmm.
and just come back home. So I don't know how those things are now with technology, but just fond memories of both my parents growing up in Riverhead for my mom, and Southold for my dad, and then for myself growing up in Mattituck. It really was like a bucolic thing, and everybody knew one another, and just the things that you say when you talk about good community. We had that in Mattituck, and all our neighbors were friendly, and
Mm-hmm.
most of the neighbors, we were in the same age groups. Some of my neighbors, the kids were a little bit older, but some were my sister's age and some were my age. So it just was nice to grow up in our community.
Yes. And then I had one other question. I don't know if you can answer. Can you say how your parents met?
They met through church.
Oh, okay.
There's a prominent church in Mattituck, Unity Baptist Church,
Yeah.
and they had like gatherings for young people to get to know each other through church, and they met that way. So,
Okay.
and they got married at that church
Okay.
in 1966. My parents got married at
Wow.
Unity Baptist Church, and in the 60s and 70s, the American Legion in Greenport was like the place to be for the reception. So they had the reception at the American Legion in Greenport.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And then they settled in Mattituck.
First, I believe they lived in Cutchogue for a
Okay.
little bit. And then we lived in Mattituck, close to where our house is now, down the street. And then when I was born, we moved into the house that I grew up in.
Okay.
So maybe that was like a year or two after that. But
Okay.
so long time in Mattituck.
Yes. And you mentioned just growing up there a bit. How would you describe Mattituck at that time? And
Oh boy. Just a beautiful place, and just lots of adventure around the corner. Where I live, there's a place called Browers Woods, and it's a community in and of itself. And it's when you go through Browers Woods, it leads to the inlet, and just having little mini adventures on the bike, and again, the whole community making sure we're behaving ourselves and just having fun, and then I remember just being outside most of the day. And then when you knew it got dark, you just knew enough to come home. Or my mom would say, well, make sure you come home for this because we're doing that. And then my mom encourages us just to be involved in our community. So she was our 4-H leader, and she was she got me involved in Cub Scouts because she really wanted all the kids to be involved. My sisters were Girl Scouts. So that was important for my mom, for us to be engaged and plugged into our community. And that's the building blocks of my success at the library, and whatever you want to say about the school board and BOCES and elected for Southold Town, I really feel like that's the formative foundation. My mom saying, we're not just in community, but we're involved in community, and this is our beloved community, and we have to be a part of it and make sure we maintain the beloved community. As Martin Luther King would say, that you can't just have a beloved community; you have to work towards it and maintain it. So I believe that. Just, proud that we listened to my mom to make sure, I remember so many fond memories of helping people in our community, whether it was like collecting cans for people in need or collecting toys for children in need or dropping off supplies for older people in our community, whatever we could do to be involved, we would like, okay, what's next? So we really got excited about that. And my mom really taught us the value of serving our community. And I don't think if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be as involved as I am now. So
Yes. And just for your time in school, going through middle school and high school, how was that experience going through?
I really felt like it was a good, because Mattituck is pretty small, or small compared to most school districts. And just to be able to know in most cases, I think I grew up with every person from kindergarten to 12th grade. And that's not so typical now. So just knowing that you know everybody, and I remember holding hands when we were in kindergarten. The teacher would walk us out of school, and then growing up and just really being good friends with everybody. And, we had such good teachers. My first grade teacher, Mrs. Munch, and my second grade teacher, Miss Sineski, being in the parade and being leading the group. And, she would let me clap the erasers out and squeegee, and you get the sponge to wipe down the board. So those things are so vivid in my memory. And we were well loved and educated by our teachers. And I think I remember even bringing apples and stuff to my teachers. So, in grade school, and then, in high school, people like Mr. Brennan, our AP English teacher, and he was also the director of our theater productions, and just him encouraging us to be ourselves, and to say, like, to explore our talent and to reach for our dreams. And I know, over the years, that's been difficult for teachers to help students do that. But I feel like in Mattituck, that still occurs. And then things recently, like Raphael Moraes receiving the Helen Wright Prince Award, and was at the school, and the library is such a beautiful spot in the high school. And Mr. Petretti was welcoming, and the principal, and all his colleagues were so amazed that he received that, and supportive. And the work that Raphael does to help our immigrant families is just beautiful, spectacular work, and not surprising that it's going on at Mattituck High School.
Yes. What about, did you have any favorite subject matter course through high school that you enjoyed the most?
Probably because of my mom. I loved history, always American history, local history, because my mom was kind of like a self-made historian, and beyond our family history, the history of our community. And then, a lot of people think that there weren't people involved in the history of Southold from the beginning, but to understand people where Amy Folk, our town historian, was able through the Pomeroy Foundation to make that marker for Elimus Reeve. And if you study Elimus Reeve, you'll want to faint for the persistence and growing up his own family, and the great heights that his own children achieved in freedom, and that he fought for his own personal freedom, and what the deleterious effect of enslavement, and his perseverance and grit to survive that, and to get his own little plot of land and his own little house and his garden, and he persevered. And for me, that's the American story. How do you survive? First, the thought of like surviving enslavement, like what does that entail?
Yes.
That it doesn't destroy your mentality, doesn't destroy your hope. And he eventually got freedom based on his hard work. And he lived in Southold, and that he was well known and talked to the young people of the community. And, just knowing the history of that. And for me, as somebody being connected to that to know that there was a person of color that got his freedom, and it wasn't just people are knowing stories that, it was just enslaved people, but it was important that they gained their freedom through their hard work and survived that. And what is that lesson for the ages of how to survive tough things that, you didn't expect to be born into those things, but you keep fighting and you're able to liberate yourself. And how do we liberate ourselves from whatever the conditions are that we're facing, whether it's in the modern era or looking back? So always history was on my mind, because my mom was a great historian, both personally and for our family, and just trying to encourage us, to know our history.
Yes.
And the old adage, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. We didn't want to go back into those things that weren't so great. And also just, liking political science and knowing who was the supervisor of the day, and remembering Supervisor Murphy over the years, and Tom Wickham, and all the great people that served the town. So it just has been, history has been important.
Yes.
And then I liked global studies. So I was pretty good with geography around the world. And then beyond the geography of where things are, like what is the political situation in those countries, and trying to remember every country on the continent of Africa or every country in Europe. And I remember doing well in geography in school, and, just really trying to connect to what the history was of our community.
Yes. And you're, not to get off subject, but and then we have two of your mom's books that she wrote about the history of the area. Was that something that she did when you were still a child, or did she work on that later?
I'm trying to remember. Maybe I was like in middle school when she started.
Okay.
So 6th or 7th grade when she started.
Okay.
And her books are in the Library of Congress.
Yes.
And she wanted to make sure, we talked about the African American voice and what it's contributed to our society. And she was interested in those voices of color through the generations. And she had remembered some people when she was a young person that contributed to the Riverhead community. And she tried to make sure that they were taking stock. And she did have her tape recorder and recorded several of those interviews, and she did make the rounds at every North Fork library and did a talk on, talking with the seniors of our community to make sure for posterity that we did take stock of their stories. And just even what you're asking me now were some of the questions that she would ask. Well, how did you grow up? Oh, you had to feed the chickens first thing, and you couldn't go to school before you did your chores. So just great that Mom locked those stories in, and that it is Library of Congress, and I believe in every North Fork library, both of her books are, as well as they are here. So
yes.
I appreciate that you noticed that. And then again, going back to the Newsday article, for me, it was so nice that I was allowed to feature those in the article with John Paul Salamanca. And I'm grateful that Randy Dodana took a picture of those, and that's a matter of our family history that we're proud of that, and so proud that my nieces can be aware of that, what their grandmother did. And, always remembering that Mom cared about not just our place in history, but the place of others, and taking stock. And yes, there were people in our community that they never had a chance to tell their story. And she really was trying to find those stories, similar to you trying to find the stories in our community.
Yes.
So just to connect that, it's pretty cool.
No, definitely. And also just for you coming out of high school, did you know what you wanted to do for a career?
I wasn't absolutely sure. In high school, I was involved in every chorus you could be in. There's a special chorus for Suffolk County. I was in that special chorus. And our music teacher had a select chorus, and we sang madrigals, and I was in the select chorus. And even in our German language group, we had a Christmas, thing where we sang, Silent Night and all the great carols in German. So vocally, I was very involved in school. And then musically as well, for instruments, I was not very good, but I was. And then Beth Young, side note, we were in high school band together, and she was much better than me. I believe we were in the 3rd clarinet. So, what we did wasn't highly functional, but we enjoyed it, and certainly enjoy joking around with Beth, next to me. And I believe the other person was Laura Burkhart. It just was, we always had good fun, and branching out to other things. Like I was also in the jazz band, and self-taught myself trumpet and the euphonium, and just exploring that. And our teachers like Mr. Lester and Mr. Petrucci allowing us to say, okay, take that trumpet home. Here's book 1, level 1 for trumpet. And just, it's called the embouchure, how to get the mouthpiece where you can make a sound. And at first it was like, beep, 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 beep. But then if you practice and hone your skill, and just proud of myself that I was able to do that. And them giving us space that we could experiment, and that the instruments just didn't sit on the shelf and collect us. They lent them out. And I think at one point I took a flute home to see if I could play the flute. So that was special. That's a special Matatuck Cutchogue upbringing where music was able to be explored, and we had such a good music department. So that was one of my thoughts of like pursuing some kind of music. So when I went to UConn, that was one of my focuses, but then it kind of turned into American history, and so it kind of phased into a double major, American history and vocal performance, and then it kind of settled on more American history. But just nice that I had that foundation at school, and not being 100% sure. And if you asked me where I would end up, I don't know if I could have said, for 16 years at the public library in Greenport. So just proud where I end up, and putting some of that history to use, especially the local history, when people are asking reference, like what you as the reference librarian, probably field most of them, but just to know what our local history is, because that's my family experience.
Yes. But you mentioned UConn. Was that something that just, were you wanting to go away to college and see something else, and then eventually making your way back to the North Fork?
Most of my siblings ended up going to Pennsylvania. So my brother and my sister went to Swarthmore, which is one of the top liberal arts colleges, and they were much smarter than I am and got scholarship funding. And my sister went to Eastern College, and now it's Eastern University, my oldest sister, Monica. And I loved, like, almost Pennsylvania reminded me of here, but it's a little bit more hilly. But I wanted to do something different. I didn't want to, not that I had anything against Pennsylvania. I loved it when we visited them. But I just wanted to see if I could go away. And my class, we were so close. Some of us did well going away, and some of us knew right away, wow, maybe I should have started with Suffolk Community College or Stony Brook or someplace closer. I didn't really mind the distance, but I did miss home.
Yes.
And that was a maturity thing for me to get used to not being home. And I'm just glad, like, Storrs reminds me of where we are. But again, it's more elevated, and that reminded me of home. And this being able to feel, okay, I feel comfortable. I can do this. And, my dad was so good at, like, driving up to pick me up and taking the ferry, or he was good at driving around, and, like, just thinking about, wow, he must have cared a lot to make sure I could get home to drive around all that time. And just fun to ride with him. And most of the time I fell asleep when we drove around. But he was such a good driver. He had driven tractor-trailer trucks and knew the highway and remembered how the interstate highway system was put in over the years. So he was such a great navigator, and just him being proud, dropping us off, but able to come and see about us too. So
yes. And then we might be jumping a bit, but just getting back to the North Fork, you've gotten involved. Well, you mentioned working at the library for 16 years, but also getting involved with the school board, and then eventually making your way to the town board. But what do you think first drew you to public service?
Because of my mom and dad, we've always been involved in the community, and I was trying to figure out a way to do that as I became an adult. And certainly since I had been home from college, and always trying to figure out a constructive way and a positive way to do that. And then my mom had run for school board when I was in high school. And because she wouldn't promise not to raise taxes, at that time there were groups like, they were called tax pacts, like, you have to agree never to raise school taxes or we won't endorse you. And my mom would be like, well, first of all, what are the needs of the students? If they need infrastructure changes, you may have to say there has to be a capital fund to improve what the infrastructure is at the school. So she didn't sign the agreement, and she wasn't successful. So I always remembered that my mom was always trying to be involved in the community, always trying to be a voice of reason, always trying to be a voice for our families. And to hear something like that if you don't do this XYZ, that's it. And then, so I always remember that. And there's people in our community that I hope that you can interview. Deacon Leroy Heiliger, he was always a proponent of people being involved. And one of the things that people don't realize is the school board is an election, and it's something that you have some kind of oversight over what the kids are doing, and how do you support the teachers and the support staff and the superintendent and the principal. So he always was talking about that in our community. So fast forward 20 years later, I'm home, and there are some openings on the school board. And for me, I'm proud that there's a tradition of people who are former alums and graduates of Mattituck-Cutchogue School District that are on the board. And just proud that I was one of those to do that. Twice elected. When I was first elected, it was finishing up a former member's term, and then I was selected to a full term. And just proud that making sure the kids had support, making sure the teachers could do what they were needed to do, and making sure the budget was appropriate to support growth and or just stability. And just proud to have gone there and not necessarily trying to recapture what was going on when I was a kid, because things change, and thank goodness we don't get educated, like we were 20 or 30 years ago. You have progress, and there's a more focus on social and emotional learning, they call it, or mental health. And to be on the cusp of that, to put more resources for the support of kids and their mental health, and to be involved on the school board as it dealt with COVID. And every kid had a Chromebook and could do that. But yes, some kids had difficulty with that remote learning. And what are the extra things that the teachers did to drop things off at home? Or, did the bus run to deliver the lunches for the families in need? So just proud of that no matter what was going on, we always tried to do the best for our kids and students and the teachers and the support staff, and caring because and that there's so much connection in terms of generational family connection of, you might have a dad who's a custodian and his son is a teacher, or you have teacher legacy where, father and son teams or mother-daughter teams of teachers, and even with the neighboring school districts. So just proud of that time and having an opportunity. There were 7 candidates for 2 positions, I think, and I won by 2 votes to finish that the last year for the previous person's term. And I don't know, hopefully I can come back to that. If you had asked me what would be heaven, it would still be on the school board and seeing what the kids are doing and supporting them and supporting the NJRTC program with Major Gorgonis. It's just so many awesome things that the school are doing to give the kids the best success that they can get. And then whether they start off, there's so many kids recently, I'm on the BOCES board as well. They're in criminal justice and they're going into law enforcement. They're in the HVAC programs to help building. They're welding, and Mattituck-Cutchogue has the carpentry program. And at first they're like, oh boy, is it going to work? And with the help of BOCES and teaming up with Mattituck-Cutchogue School District, we got it started. And now Superintendent Petretti, who did his own podcast, reported that more students are coming from neighboring districts. So you just want to do high fives to everybody and giving chances in multiple ways, that you just don't have to go to college, and you not just the super scholar athlete, that all the kids in between that have different interests have some place at the school and some track for success. So I'm just proud to have been a part of that for a small time.
And then how did the opportunity come about for you to run for town board for Southold?
That's a good question. I think it was when Sarah and Greg ran, I think it was 2019. I was still on the school board, and I had talked to Catherine Casey Quigley about it, and I was interested, but somehow in our talk, she was at the Peconic School. Her and her sister are the coordinators and people in charge of the Peconic School, and we had the meeting to discuss that in the Peconic School, and something remembered me to the kids of Mattituck-Cutchogue. And at that time, my term wasn't up. And I just thought about the kids in Mattituck. And that my time wasn't done. And so grateful for the opportunity to be asked to run. And I think they ended up choosing the great Bob Hanlon, who isn't with us anymore. But what a great mind for the environment. And he was the right choice for them to choose.
Yes.
So, sometimes you think you miss your opportunity. But I was felt proud to say I still have time on my school board term. And I was asked again in 21, the next election cycle. And what a team we had. It's Greg Dorosky and Captain Liz Galuli and Candace Hall, who's the current village clerk.
Mm-hmm.
She ran at that time as the Southold clerk, and it wasn't successful then. And she was the only one of our team that didn't get in. Mm-hmm. And we were heartbroken, but in good time, she became the village clerk. And Dan Goodwin and mm-hmm. Dr. Eric Sepnosky and Elizabeth Peebles. Mm-hmm. It just was a sterling team of we have the chance to do some good. Mm-hmm. And just proud to be a part of that. Mm-hmm. And looking back, just trying to do the best with the opportunities that you have. Mm-hmm. And for Greg and I, one of the big opportunities was passing the large house size legislation, because at the time it was 3-3. It was a bipartisan board, and we had campaigned on that. We thought that if Greg and I could get on and support Sarah Napa, who got on in 2019, that we really could force the issues that were not being dealt with. And one of the hot topics was house size, because of development pressure and people coming from away and not really understanding what's in keeping with the community culture, and mm-hmm. building kind of outlandish palaces and blocking, views. So just proud that was one of the first things that we did, was pass that large house size. And of course, any legislation has to be looked at again. And we're hoping with the civics that we can kind of update what we have, because we still see some of those unfortunate situations where people's views are being blocked, mm-hmm. and really kind of things that are not in keeping with what our architectural style is. And, people have the right to do what they want to do, but what is the effect of your neighbors and mm-hmm. your community? And so just proud that just getting after the work. And we had a phrase whatever we do, we're not going to kick the can down the road. And just proud of mm-hmm. It was difficult things to deal with. And some of the things we're dealing with now, when we campaigned in 2021, we were talking about the comprehensive plan. Mm-hmm. And now we're talking about the zoning update to the comprehensive plan. So that's interesting. 4 years later, we're still grappling with that. But thanks to people like Heather Lanza and mm-hmm. Mara Cerezo, who's in the planning department, we kind of have a roadmap to deal with these tough issues and to help us deal with things that are coming down the pike that are development pressures, and to do it in a smart way, mm-hmm. and to do the zoning update in a transparent way, where we have the zoning update committee they're like a blue ribbon group. I'm just sterling members mm-hmm. from our community that are supporting the effort, and along with the town board, that the town board isn't just pushing out, we want this, doesn't that, get mm-hmm. it done. It's just a cooperative effort that is, I feel, successful. And hopefully that's how we do things in the future, where it's collaborative. We're listening to our community stakeholders. We're, making sure we have the community meetings and mm-hmm. checking in with the business community that might be affected by some of the zoning, and never trying to reduce the frustration, and, just things trying to take care of the cell phone service, and working with an independent company to assess what we have. Let's not build extra stuff if we already have some infrastructure mm-hmm. in place, but how can we make the infrastructure effective for the safety, for those zones where there's no reception, like in the middle of town in mm-hmm. Feather Hill, that's a difficult spot, or by Town Beach, where you might need to call for assistance if something happens to somebody in the water. We should have that clear yes. reception. So just to be getting after that work, and that most people are telling us through the survey, whatever you have to do, let's just get it done. Yeah. So, and just having the support of our community has been pretty cool with mm-hmm. the stuff that the town board has done.
Yes. And then I just wanted to go back to just getting elected in 2021. You became the first African American elected to office in Southold Town history. What did that moment mean to you, and what has that experience been like since?
I guess everything is in a circle. Like, it just reminds me of my mom teaching us about our history
Mm-hmm.
and the value of stories of people of color, and maybe in the traditional story, those people being left out.
Mm-hmm.
And then remembering my great grandfather Joe and my great grandmother Mary, who lived here over 100 years ago, near the town hall, and their efforts propelling our family to the future.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Just being the realization of their hopes and prayers.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
No, that's okay.
And, just trying to do good,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We've had some community forums leading up to the election, and just having the thought of, like, being the representative of everybody in Southold Town, irregardless of political party
Mm-hmm.
or age, or even representing kids that can't vote, talking
Mm-hmm.
to our youth. I'm the youth bureau liaison, so we talk to our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And just having their kind of, like, unjaded, thought of what politics should be,
Mm-hmm.
and then knowing the reality is not always that, Pollyannish. And how do you deal with that? How do you make sure our kids aren't disillusioned with politics as they prepare to engage with it?
Mm-hmm.
And do they feel represented? And I hope that I've represented everybody in town, and even the people that voted against me, I have to represent them.
Mm-hmm.
And just having another opportunity to say, I'm ready to go again, to say, send me back. I'm ready to continue the work on the zoning update and things about the environment. The town passed the water quality, water conservation resolution, and we're working on things like housing. Like, that was probably the top issue, was housing, when I first ran 4 years ago. And guess what? Housing is the top issue now. And we feel like we've coming along with our bipartisan effort for our housing plan, and now we have at least $5 million in the housing plan, and the people of Southold granted the 0.5 transfer tax. They didn't have to approve that.
Mm-hmm.
They did. So now we have to put our money where our mouth is. So just, it's more than just a footnote that first person of color to be elected. Now what? So for me, making space for other people of color to be connected to town government. So that's one. Making sure the youth is connected to our town board and what we do and how we're representing them or not representing them. And hopefully the kids have voice that they can tell us if they don't feel like they're being represented. Mm-hmm. And making sure that we really are talking about the issues, and it's not something where it's like, well, my personality clashes against yours, we're never going to get anything. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And for the most part, I would say over the last 2 years, it hasn't been like that. We are collegial. We are bipartisan. We're trying to do the work of the town. And we are, relying on community experts. It's not just what the town board believes, that it is a collective movement with stakeholders, with the business community, especially with the zoning update. So yes. I feel like we're on the right track, and that's just a proud moment in history. And in the realm of things, what's the future history, and being responsible for that, having vision on how Southold will develop, being one of the 6 deciders of the important issues, and how to defend Southold over overdevelopment, and how to make sure that people in the business community have opportunities, and how to make sure, somebody made a joke that Southold is the least annoying brother of the Hamptons. Like, we don't want to be the Hamptons. We want to stay Southold. What does that mean? So, for me, somebody said when I was elected, you guys, you have a lot to review. Don't screw it up. Like, don't make it worse. Yes. And I don't think it's become worse, but that's a constant concern of mine. Don't make it worse. And how can we continue to grow Southold together with everybody getting the most opportunity they can, whether you're a business person or whether you're a young person that wants to live here. So just working on that, and proud that there are some housing projects coming down the pike, like on Love Lane, and hopefully there's ownership units on Carroll Avenue. But being a part of that, being constructive to address the issues that people are telling us are great concern, and just being open to that and never kind of shunning what people are saying, but accepting it and trying to work with it and trying to adapt to figure out the best solution.
Yes. And just over your time now on town board, is there something you've learned serving on the town board that has surprised you or changed the way you view local government?
I wouldn't necessarily say surprised, but just happy to know that you can work in a bipartisan effort. I'll give an example. Recently, the working waterfront legislation was signed by County Executive Ed Romaine. Mm-hmm. That was a nice moment for Greenport, especially when people like Mary Beth Phillips, who's a long-time village board member, and that's in her family history. That's her family history, is working the waterfront. And her being an advocate of that over the years, and Mayor Stussy talking about that. And now, again, putting the money where your mouth is to say that's important to not only remember that we had working waterfront. Like Greenport has such a rich history of the wooden minesweepers for World War II and the vibrant fishing industry. So if we can capture some of that,
yes,
and then maybe it has to be a different iteration. Maybe now it's the brilliant oyster farmers that are so successful because our waterways are clean and the oysters are doing that work and their natural thing of cleaning and filtering the water. And what a delicious commodity to send out to all over our great Northeast and to make a concerted effort. But I recently said at a forum, okay, that's good, but how do we sustain that? And how do we make that kind of second nature that's important to us and we're going to defend that? So I feel like, that's important to make sure that if we believe that and we talk about that we put our money where our mouth is and continue that support because it is the East End or that is Greenport or that's Southold or that's the North Fork. So I'm just glad that and other things have come up for oyster farmers to update their commitment. I think New York State Agri-Markets had a grant for $1.2 million. Those things are important. And it's upgrading the equipment for the oyster farmers just for success. So yes, we need more success. And then tying everything together, it is a housing question for the new group of young people to come in. And it is a thing of like, are we making sure that we have the workforce that can do what we need in our community? And we understand we're a seasonal community, but how do you develop things that make it a year-round economy? And what are the tools that you need? So just so proud to be on the case and trying to make sure that we're not leaving anything out that can be helpful toward our success.
Yes. And I want to touch back on some of the issues with going on in the town, but just if you could touch on your work at the Floyd Memorial Library, how has that space and your role in it shaped your approach to community and outreach?
I guess like I was telling my mom, telling us like it's important to be involved in the community, whether it was 4-H, like I think we were called the Mattatuck He-Men, even though we were like 8 years old. Like we were so tough we could do anything we wanted to. And building that confidence that we could be involved in our community when we were 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. We were just young kids, but we felt like we could help our community. So transferring that to like adulthood is pretty cool. And it's just interesting. Just say the question again. I went off topic.
No, just working at Floyd Memorial Library over the years, how has that space and your role in it shaped your approach to community and outreach?
I think that pretty much is my adult foundation to public service because we're a public library. And we're the public library that's literally in the community. A lot of places are on the main drag or next to something else. And we're really ensconced in the beautiful Greenport Village. And just working here for the past 16 years and helping young people, address literacy and start them off and their first board books and shapes and numbers and helping people really trying to discover what their hobbies are, or maybe somebody's going through a tough time and they're trying to do a fresh start for their own sake. people pursuing those things in earnest and doing self-improvement and trying to make a change, whether it's health-wise or mental health-wise. And the library is right in the center of it. And just that the library is a safe space, not only for our young people, maybe after school, but, I often ask people where we are on the itinerary list. So I say like, oh, good morning. I'm glad to see you. Where are we on the list? Did you go to IGA yet? Did you go to the post office yet? And we are on the list. So
Yes.
A lot of times people say we're the start of it or we're at the end. And once they get their book, they go right home. And that's been nice. And it has formed my public service as a town board member to greet people nicely and to be a good listener. So many positive interactions if you could be a good listener and not always try to have something prepared to say to somebody, but what would they say to you and how do you respond and how do you listen? And there's a lot of people where we're really their only socialization during the day because they're by themselves. So just proud that we are aware of that and care and notice things like, oh, I haven't seen Mrs. Smith in a while. And even like in our greater community, having the Peconic Landing connection where people get bussed over for the book club or they come over themselves for the twice weekly art class. So we really are engaged and proud of that. And, helping people at the circulation desk. And some people come in, they're kind of thinking about what they need, but they're not quite. And maybe giving them space to figure that out. And then if they have to ask a question, not always like jumping on somebody when they come on just welcome them and say hello. And people have been telling us like, hey, I live in another community. And when I go into my community library, people don't say anything. And you guys say hello and good morning.
Yes.
So just trying to be kind that way. And we get it back. A lot of times people in the community drop off donuts and cookies and not to say we're asking for anything in return, but people care that we're doing okay. And even what you've, accomplished through the podcast, gee whiz. And not only public officials, but people who are just the blue collar people of Greenport and our North Fork community, or people are doing positive things that they get a positive highlight when you share the podcast. So I'm just proud of the work that you've done and you as a colleague and bragging about what you're doing. And have you talked to Chris yet? He's doing the podcast. You better do that. Like consider it and giving out your business card and in a small way, helping you get some of the people that you've interviewed. It's just been a nice journey. And I don't think I could have been as successful as I have been as a town board member without that foundation at the library. And before that, being involved as a kid in our community. And I can't envision any future without being involved. And that's just in my core beliefs to not just to be involved, but to be involved constructively and positively and make things better. So I'm just glad to be a part of that. And we have such a beloved community. Like when I think of people like Pastor Wimberly at the AME Zion, at Clinton AME Zion, or Reverend Jocelyn down the street, they're embedded in our community. And it's just a lot of times the library brings all those people together. So it's special to be a part of that.
Yes. And you've also been involved in the Eastern Suffolk BOCES and Sheriff's Department Citizen Advisory Board. What do those roles let you see about the wider county that inform your work in Southold?
I love Sheriff Tulin, and I'm glad that you got him to come in. And that was one of the first big interviews, I think, of an elected official. And he's the highest ranking law enforcement in Suffolk County. And my dad, as a former corrections officer, and I've had a chance to tell Sheriff Tulin that what my dad's service meant to me, and that my dad and other corrections officers of color, the Bronze Shields, paved the way for him to be the sheriff. And he is doing good work, and he is interrupting the school to prison pipeline. And he does believe that people should have a second chance when they pay their debt to society. And he does reach out to our communities to make sure that Suffolk is safe. And he is a person of great integrity, and really he's one of the first sheriffs that has that criminal justice background. And he's one of the first sheriffs, I think, to have a PhD. So I'm
Yes.
just proud to know him. And like when he walks in the room, I feel like it's the safest place in the universe. And I'm blessed that when I was on the school board, he came to talk to our students about the Sandy Hook Promise. That was a proud moment. And Chief Flatley sent the gang down to be representative, and he brought corrections officers who were from Mattituck. It just was a nice moment. And the kids got the lesson of keeping their community safe and what's their responsibility in terms of like noticing things that aren't right and telling their parents or their teacher. And just proud of what his mission is. And even dealing with something with bail reform, that's been difficult, but
Yes.
he's dealt with it in a professional way, and he's advocated for changes and how judges might have more control over the cases rather than just being like out on bail. So just proud that he's been telling what his experiences are. And I don't know, I feel like it's everything is like connected. Like being a BOCES member, I know there's students that are in the criminal justice system that will become corrections officers or police officers in our town. And we recently, as a commissioner for Southold, just proud to know there's kids that did that program in BOCES, and now they went to the academy, and now they're going to be police. I just want to jump for joy. Like that's what you want to happen, that the young people policing our community are from our community. And maybe we have to work on getting them housing, but you know, they're renting apartments or whatever they're doing to hang on there. I think about that when we think of housing and things being set up for them to be successful, but to be a part of that process where the kids went from Mattituck to the criminal justice system programs, and then they graduated and went to whatever the academies, and then they got their training, and now they're police officers in our community. So that's one thing. And then just through BOCES, trying to foster the non-traditional success avenue. And my colleague, Linda Goldsmith, longtime Oyster Ponds board member, she had an expo at the rec center in Peconic. And just to say, BOCES is here, just to say there's different paths to success. And knowing like the plumbing student might be able to hire his cohorts from high school, and they have student debt and they weren't sure what to do, but now they're being successful working with a friend who's a plumber because we need plumbers in our community.
Yes.
So how do you continue to foster that and to foster opportunities and to be aware that our community, because we're out east, we need that. But again, it's essential that we have places where those people that are going to be the productive members protecting our community and building our community and taking care of older folks. I'm getting older. We need younger folks to make sure that we can sustain our beautiful Southold and Greenport. So just being a part of that, whether it's through the town board or BOCES, or just always trying to be actively supporting what the community needs are, being at the heart of it, finding solutions, and maybe the solutions aren't quick, but developing them and trying to make sure that we do the right thing for everybody that's trying to just do the best that they can.
Yes, definitely. And I think you've also touched on this a bit, but just for your 4 years on the town board, what are you most proud of with what you've accomplished so far?
I'm just proud that to be a part of a team that's highly functioning, and at the top of that team is our supervisor, Al Krupski. And I wasn't sure if I would be able to work with Dr. Ann Smith again. I worked with her when she was a superintendent. I was on the school board. That's just been a blessing to get back to a table where Ann Smith is there.
Yes.
And just being able to thank Judge Louisa Evans for her over 30 years of service, and to watch the up-and-coming race that I'm a part of, to see who will succeed her. That's important that we get that right, and that Fishers Island continue to have a strong voice. And I'm hoping for Kate Stevens to be that voice. And with Jill Doherty, just her work on the housing plan, and that's a bipartisan effort, and everybody's pulling for that success. And having new people like Andrea Menjivar, who's our housing coordinator, and she's working in tandem with Gwen Schroeder. So I think the government is working properly. The zoning update, once we pass that, I think it will clarify things for our business community and clarify things for people wanting to develop things in Southold the right way.
Yes.
So just overwhelmingly blessed that that work is ongoing and that
Yes.
we're on the right path. And it is a bipartisan thing. And the civic leaders want the same thing. And the business leaders are chiming in with what their needs are. So it's not just like the town board operating in an ivory tower, that we have the community walking in and talking with us. And this trying to be responsible and say, I do accept my role, and this is what my vision is, and what's the town board's collective vision, and how are we communicating with our citizenry? How are we making sure that people understand the processes that we're undergoing to make sure that the government is functioning properly on the local level?
Yes.
And then just being responsible what we're responsible for. You know, there's so many things we can't control when we have state mandates, or the way that the federal government is not really supporting municipalities with support. So how do you make do and still be successful with, you know, with what you can do on the town level?
Yes.
And just getting people excited about, you know, their engagement in the town level, where, you know, you might be disenchanted with what things are going on the state level or the national level, but locally you have a voice. Locally you can be engaged. Locally you can join the civic. Locally you can figure out, hey, they have the budget meeting. I'm going to the budget meeting. This is my tax dollars. You know, I hope that you're using my tax dollars. And people, I think for the most part, feel that we're doing it right. But if they're not, you can tell us. So,
Yes. And just looking ahead, for maybe the next 5 to 10 years, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing Southold Town?
I feel like there's a couple. One is still housing. I still hear, 4 years ago, a mom grabbed the hem of my shirt and said, you have to do something about housing. You know, my daughter had to move to South Carolina, and I still hear those stories now. So for me, it's housing. One is big housing. And just proud to be somebody that supported those efforts. And then now we actually have a housing plan that can do that and go forward. So just not giving up on that and trying to be patient for people to come to the town and for the town to have ideas about, okay, what town-owned properties do we have where we could develop housing? So being a little bit more agile and nimble about how the town approach is, but now seeing these pieces like the housing plan, like our housing coordinator, working with Gwen Schroeder, our town liaison, to go forward with people who are coming forward. So that's not, so housing. And I would just say, like, you know, we've talked about in community forums about the economy of Southold and Greenport being very seasonal. And that's true, but that doesn't mean that's how it always has to be. So just looking for opportunities to diversify the economy that can be year long, and to diversify an economy that supports young people and young families, to diversify an economy that gives us success no matter what time of year it is, and accepting our traditional seasonal roots, but trying to work towards something better. And I think I've been part of that effort to plant seeds when we talk about students in these programs for woodworking and HVAC and welding.
Yes.
So we need those capabilities, and we have to have a place for those people that have those skills to stay. So just working on the economy to diversify it. And then I would say, you know, certainly with coastal resiliency, you know, water levels are going to rise every year, and preparing for that. And I do feel like folks like Dan Goodwin and our town engineer are on the drainage projects, and, you know, they're cutting our outfall so the water discharge doesn't just rush into our estuary. And that protects, you know, the waters in terms of like oyster farming, like, you know, it's a synergy of effort, and just making sure we maintain that. And then Supervisor Krupski likes to joke about, oh, what's the drainage? Like, people don't think of drainage as being the most important thing, but if you have a major storm, it does become a major thing. And just to be proud that the town is focusing resources to make sure that as our environment changes, that we have some coastal resiliency, and working with people like Peconic Estuary Program and working with Cornell Cooperative Extension. And we're just trying to be ready for those changes. And I really feel proud of that water legislation to be ready for those changes. So just being a part of those concerted efforts that should show some dividends in terms of how our environment will eventually change.
Yes. And I think you've talked about young people in the community and growing up out here, but and you probably had people ask you already, but if a young person from the area came to you and said, I want to get involved, what advice would you give them?
I would say a couple of things. I would say if they're college level kids, have that college experience and figure out if you even want to come back. But I would want to invite them back just because they're our community kids. So that's one thing, kind of explore and figure out what you want to do and have maybe take a gap year. In Europe, a lot of students, they're not sure what they want to do. So they take a gap year to understand and travel and just focus in and gain some maturity. So that's one thing. Just explore your surroundings. And then I'm proud to be the liaison to the Youth Bureau. So I have been asked that question. So I would say get involved with the Youth Bureau. And I'm so proud to announce that we have a new Youth Bureau director, Heather Huerta, and she has 2 master's degrees. So she's ready for any challenge that any of our young people can throw at her, and she's doing good, engaging with all the different school districts. So I would say be involved in the Youth Bureau. And we're trying to foster student internships with our local businesses. And we're trying to make sure that we're developing safe spaces for kids to have game night and movie night. So we're just doing some interesting things. And Heather's reaching out to the neighboring youth bureaus like Southampton. So we're just trying to make sure, could we do a concerted effort with all the youth bureaus on the East End and pool our resources? And can we just have fun, or can we have a battle of the bands so it's just interesting, the opportunities for our young people. And Janet Douglas, our rec center director, has done very well with her programming for adults and for young people. It's just a good effort in our town to make sure that our young people have fun and feel engaged and I'm glad that the kids come to our library, but just yet another space where they can have fun and explore their hobbies and be crafty and be musical or just have fun playing games. Yes. So, and then I would just say, remember where you're from. Take where you're from with you, and take your values with you. Don't let society change what you are, and be proud of where you're from as a young person from our area. So. And just blessed to have the opportunities I've had with some of our young people who've engaged in things like the Martin Luther King essay contest.
Yes.
And young people like Faith Welch, who I think you interviewed as well for the podcast. So just proud of young people like Faith who are being positive in our community and really trying to bring other kids with her. And we try to be role models for our kids. But what better role model than another young person like Faith Welch? And there are many Faith Welches in our group, but she is a prominent student in our Greenport community, and just happy for the positive impact that she's had of talking about our local history and, just proud of her and what she's accomplished, and waiting for the next young people to come up and say, here I am, and I want to be engaged. So proud to be a part of that.
Yes. And you might have mentioned some names already, but what are some of the elders or teachers or quiet heroes from this area who've shaped you, but maybe aren't widely known?
That might be a long list. Certainly my parents, Dorothy and Otha Mealy, so they're no longer with me, but I feel like they're in my heart and looking down on me, hopefully happy with the accomplishments that I've been able to do. And just my family in general. My sister Kim has been very supportive, and she's a PhD in political science, and she is the head of one of the largest associations, the American Political Science Association.
Yes.
So she really is like my political guru and confidant, and she gives good advice, and I listen most of the time. And my sister Monica, my oldest sister, is a social worker. So just remembering to have a heart for the community with her social work, and not forgetting the people in need and what the needs are, understanding the needs. And just my nieces, my brother-in-law, my Uncle Wendell, who is a Greenport person, and people think I live in Greenport because of him, but I'm from Mattituck, and just all the roles he's had, and people had seriously and joked, oh, he could have been the mayor of the village, or he could have been the police chief when the police force was disbanded. So it just was interesting, the stories I've heard and his contribution to our beloved community. And he really is like the fabric of our community, and to have some part of that, and some encouragement to make sure, wow, what did they do with their time and their experience, and how can I make sure I maximize my time and in a kind way, and make sure I'm continuing to put the community first. So, and then some of my teachers, like Tom Brennan, my English teacher I mentioned, really trying to unlock what we wanted to do as young people and supporting us, and never saying a dumb idea or like a dumb vision, always trying to say like, it's okay to have dreams and to try to achieve them, but always have a plan B. And, people like Rona Smith and her housing background, she was behind the development of the Mattituck cottages, and we can't let the cottages be the only ownership housing in Southold. And I feel like we're on the right path to not let that happen. Or, people just from Peconic Landing just giving me good advice and saying, hey, I saw you on Channel 22 and I read the article about housing. Don't give up. And just the basic encouragement. And it's just nice to have the community that we have, and our faith community, like I mentioned, Reverend Natalie Wimberly and what they're doing at Clinton to be engaged in the community, and just to know people are praying for my success. That's a special thing to think about.
Yes.
And to know that the community is for you and can be tough with what's going on. Hey, you got to make sure you take care of this, but always in a loving way. And people like Bill Ruland, he was a longtime school board member, and he was a longtime deputy supervisor with former supervisor Scott Russell. He was a deacon at my church with my dad. And I really kind of like patterned my involvement with public service with being on the school board. And then I didn't really intend to have everything, but just, all the things I've accomplished, there was kind of a blueprint. And it didn't happen the exact way that Mr. Ruland's path unfurled. And I just am proud, like he encouraged me to run and to be a good member and to make sure, to know the difference between what the kids need and what the kids want, and to be responsible in a fiduciary way to the taxpayers, that you have to make sure the kids get what they need, but you also have to make sure it's within the tax realm and that things are okay and nothing's over budget and you're not wasting anything. And people like Tom Wickham, like you interviewed him, I listened to his podcast like 3 times. Yes. And just the cross paths of him, giving me encouragement and just what he did as an elected, and trying to learn from things that went right and things that went wrong, and not duplicating things that are not right, but correcting them and not falling into certain things that can happen when you're in the political realm. So I'm just glad that I've had good teachers and people that really want my success and, the success of the community, putting that first. And recently, there's a lot of issues that are affected Greenport Village and Southold. Just that the success of Southold should be the success of Greenport Village and vice versa. And what does that mean? And what does that mean for the communication of Southold Board with the Village Board? And what is our responsibility to make sure that we're doing things in the right way and that people get the resources that they need? So always continuing that conversation, even though we might not agree, but we can agree to the process and that it might take time, but just having that understanding that we have to be as fair and equitable as we can with the resources that we have.
Yes, no, definitely. And I think I had one other question just from growing up here and continuing to be involved in the community up to today. What have you enjoyed most about living and working on the North Fork?
Just of getting to know the various communities, and Mattituck's a little bit different than some of the other hamlets and villages, and just proud to have grown up there, and like certain things we don't do in Mattituck.
Mm-hmm.
We don't ignore our neighbors. We look after our neighbors, and
Mm-hmm.
we have a good sense of community, and we support the school, and we want kids to have the opportunities they want, and we want to make sure that, everything is going to the best of its capability. And just bringing that to whatever I'm doing, whether it's working, how can the library be more efficient with how we help people? Or, what are the resources that we have when it's beyond the library's capacity? We have a great support network with CAST. And understanding that's okay that we don't have the answer, and not being upset with yourself like, wow, that person's going through a lot, but we really don't have the resources to help them. But no is not the only answer. Oh, wait a minute. Here's my friend. She works at CAST. If you can get there, she can help you. So just being involved in that cooperative network of community members looking after one another.
No, it's special. I think the community comes together in that way.
And then, Greenport is a big part of that. And understanding that working in Greenport, and that when people have, unfortunate things like house fires or a death in the family, our community really comes close together and supports the people in need. And I don't want that to go away.
Yes.
And so many changes from people coming from away, and COVID changed everything, but I still think we have such a strong kernel of the community value of like, how are we looking after one another?
Yes.
And certainly that's how I look at my work through the library and all the things that I do, Eastern Suffolk BOCES and the town board, specifically the town board. I try to be welcoming. When a guest speaker comes, I'm like, oh, that's Dr. Jones. Okay, hi, good morning, Dr. Jones. And people might even be surprised that I want to greet them and shake their hand. But why can't we be kind when we have a guest speaker telling us about something that's important that the town's involved in? So just, not missing those opportunities to be kind and welcoming and supportive. And even if we disagree about something, that developing that path where we can keep the communication channels open.
Yes.
And I think I've been at the heart of that. I try to be like that, even though never making it personal, or if it is personal, you try to sidestep it and say, hey, who needs help in that situation? So let's put that aside and work on who and what needs help.
Yes. No, and I think just lastly, if there was any last minute things you'd like to say, whether, especially with going into the last few weeks before the election, that you'd like to say to our listeners.
I'm just glad the people have been engaged in the community forums. We had one in Mattituck, one in Greenport, and we had a candidates forum last night at Peconic Landing. And being a Peconic Landing member and feeling like being home and talking about the issues that are affecting everybody, it's so important. And I know the people of our Greenport Southold community know the issues are important. And whoever you vote for, I hope that you early vote October 25th to November 2nd and vote on Election Day. I hope that I've showed that I can continue what I'm doing, but I'm just, make sure you're educated on the issues, and make sure you read your Suffolk Times and your Eastern Beacon and your Norfolk Sun to make sure you know the issues. And all of our community members come together to make sure we're understanding the issues. And we really are great voters and have a great voting percentage. And I hope it's up this season. And just a lot of things are going on that have to be stewarded and taken care of. And I think I've been doing that. And I hope that the voters show that in the polls. But whoever you vote for, just please vote and be engaged in our community. And it is something where the more engagement we have, the better our community and our society will be. And we have great candidates that have stepped forward. So it's just nice to be a part of that, to say, I'm ready to keep going and, just fighting for the things that we need. And I don't know, I just feel like on the local level, it's the most purest version of whatever you call that, democracy or engagement. So hopefully people will take advantage of that. And just to say to you, I said I might ask you a question.
Yeah.
So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
And again, I'm proud to have supported you in a small way, getting people here and there. And I shared who some of my favorite podcasts are. Just share a thought on, where you began and where you are now. You're nearly at 200 edited, uploaded podcasts. And that's certainly a milestone here in our community. And, I don't know how you feel. Like, just talk about how you feel and if you feel comfortable. And I'm just proud of you. And
Yes.
however you want to continue this venture, this journey, I hope to continue to support you. But just in awe at how you've carried on and help people to feel comfortable. And, people thinking, well, why do you want to talk to me? I don't really have but really sussing out they did have an interesting story and they did have value in what they shared. So from you started out to where you are now, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, I think I didn't think it would kind of grow to what it's become. I was focused mostly on Greenport and getting people, whether they were at the Historical Society, but just with the word getting out and really wanting to include the whole North Fork. I thought that was important, and getting a wide range of guests on, whether people that really have grown up out here or have moved here more recently. I feel like everyone has a story to share. And just in a way, I hope that it does bring the community together. And just, it's still kind of surprising seeing the number of episodes, and it is time consuming, but I do enjoy it and meeting new people, interacting with them. And I think that's unique within a town. You can get to know people more, and not just, if I was doing something like this in a city, I think it would feel different. So I think it's special to do this and record people's stories, and it's almost 2 years now, so it's been special.
So I've heard people comment after they've had their interview with you that you've helped them to feel comfortable, or they might have been nervous, or they might have even come in and had a pre-talk to the talk.
Yeah.
How do you develop your questions, and how do you have that ability to make people comfortable? Or help them to feel comfortable? How do you develop that?
Well, I'm not trained in doing oral histories, but I think just making sure that they know that you're really listening to them, and not just sitting there in front of you, that you're actually engaging with them. And I think it's important, even to be open with yourself to them, because I think they like to know a little bit about you, and just giving them everything in the beginning, whether it's the questions or just so that they're not surprised with things. And people might have different opinions on how to do that, and then the questions I've kind of, because I'm in the library, a reference and local history librarian, I feel like it comes to me naturally to research and try to come up with a nice or an engaging group of questions, whether just seeing what people have done, researching through newspapers and resumes, and just finding out that way, or just talking with the person ahead of time, just to make sure that it's personalized more, because I don't want it to just be a generalized oral history. I wanted people to think the questions are thoughtful.
Yeah, and I certainly have heard that, and I've experienced that with my interview today. I just have one final question. I love to ask you the numbers. Not that the numbers are important,
Yes.
but I always find it fascinating who's listening and from where people are listening. And you've given me various updates. Can you just update your listeners, like, how many uploads or whatever you call it, and what formats they can get the interview on, and who's listening internationally? Can you give like a review of that?
Yes. So, well, we're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and I think Amazon and a few other smaller places. And also with the WLIW with Gianna Volpe, we were able to kind of collaborate with them and have
that was fun to go on her show, and she interviewed us both, and you had a chance to talk about it. That was so gracious of her to add that link.
Yes, no, definitely. But we have, I think, over 200 followers, which is I'm happy. I wasn't even looking at that. It
just is.
It's just what that is, and then just the watch times and the views. I think we have over 20,000 something views, which is, I think, pretty good for a library podcast. And we've had some interesting views from, I think on our YouTube page, we've had some views from Brazil or France. So it just kind of varies, and just seeing the demographics and analytics for each of them is interesting. But it seems like it's been a nice, healthy growth, and people people always comment saying, "Keep going. It's great for the community," and I really am happy with how people have responded to it.
So, last question. I know people have said to you, what's next? Or are you going to write a book about this? Are you keeping a memoir? Like, any thought to that aspect of it? Because this really is a pretty cool project. And, any thought like for the future vision of it? Or you're just going to keep plugging away at your interviews, which is perfectly fine. But any thought to do anything to honor what you've, really compiled, the community voice?
Yes. No, I've thought people have commented about that, and they're like, you're creating a really an archive database, a real collection. And I've thought about trying to analyze and come up with whether it's a book or to give a talk or something at a meeting of some kind, or poster session, just to showcase the work and the uniqueness of the community. And I think writing something and coming up with a book and maybe analyzing different groups within there, whether they're artists or farmers, all different types of things, and trying to compile that into a book would be a really nice idea. And it would be nice to do something like that. And I hope to continue doing interviews. We're towards the end of the year. I'm slowing down a bit, but we'll probably restart again in the new year.
And I said, whatever celebration or however you commemorate it, there should be Prosecco and cheese and crackers or some grapes or something. So hopefully it's something joyous to celebrate your really hard work. And just for this, process interviewing me, it's just grateful, that you thought of me, and just grateful for me to share my story and to really have enjoyed all the stories that you've captured. So just thank you for interviewing me, and wish you continued success, and proud to be your colleague at the Floyd Memorial Library, and keep doing good. So thank you. And thanks for answering my questions. I didn't think you would really answer what I asked you, but thank you.
No, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on today and share your story and your career and all the work you've done in the community. It's really important, and it was a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you, Chris.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 186 with Brian Mealy. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.